The sales and marketing divide is something that has always puzzled me. In fact, I recollect one of the companies that I worked for as the head of sales, many years ago. And it was always a struggle to be on the same page with the head of marketing and with the marketing team. And later on, when I became CEO of another company, it always, it simply sapped my energy, trying to get the sales leadership and the marketing leadership onto the same page. And now the story continues, with the several startups that I have been exposed to over the last few years. Now, this is a real issue. And we all know that a company's success depends on collaboration across all teams. But perhaps the most important collaboration is between sales and marketing. This is something like, if you look at a soccer game, it's like the relationship between the midfielders and the strikers, right? So to actually discuss this sales and marketing conundrum in the B2B space specifically, I have with me today Ajay Shukla. Ajay is the managing director of EdOrbis for the Middle East, Africa, and India regions. So Ajay, welcome to this live chat.
Thank you very much, and pleasure to be here.
Well, friends, today we are streaming live on LinkedIn, YouTube, and Twitter. My name is Thomas Abraham, and I work with SaaS startups, helping them with their business strategy, go-to-market, and global expansion. So, Ajay, now let me just bring you into the discussion. Ajay, why do we talk so much about the great divide, between sales and marketing?
We talk about it rightly so. And in my belief, traditional organizations that I call the 20th century organizations haven't really transformed themselves into a 21st century organization where everyone is a marketer and everyone is in sales. So that great divide exists because functionally, historically, we've been divided in a certain way. Now, why is this so? I think that's the key question. And I feel that there are three aspects, in my opinion, which make this divide so stark. First one is structural, that sales and marketing have always operated with Chinese walls in traditional organizations. That marketing operates centrally, sales is in the field, and marketing does certain campaigns, does some lead generation, and often not entirely in consonance with sales. So that's the first reason, which is structural, that structurally they are siloed. The second thing is hierarchical. Now, this may come a little bit of a surprise to you, but marketing has elevated itself into an intellectual function. And sales has been relegated into a foot soldiering function. And what also happens is that marketing is an intrinsic part of strategic planning because they are closer to the headquarters and strategic planning units, closer to the CEO. So in that sense, the power equation is pretty lopsided. So there is a hierarchical reason, and there is no reason why this exists. In fact, I treat sales as a very noble profession. Okay. We are solving problems for customers.
Correct.
Who else does that? I mean, the moment you start observing that through the lens of sales being a noble profession, then it will get elevated to the right place in the organization. So the second is hierarchical. And the third one, according to me, is political. Now, again, this may come as a surprise to you, but they serve as perfect punching bags for each other. How many times have you heard, Thomas, that the sales guys complain that the leads that they are getting from marketing are useless and they are wasting a lot of time in the field? Now, how many times have you heard from the marketing folks that we are spending so much money and none of our leads are being attended to or being converted? So it's really three: structural, hierarchical, and political. That's why this divide exists.
Yeah, I think these are great points, Ajay, and I also wanted to just share, some perspectives. Of course, there is overlap with some of the things that you said. In a lot of larger, B2B enterprise organizations, you have senior leaders in running sales and marketing separately, and often there is a personality clash of egos, and there seems to be a lot at stake, to really figure out who will take credit for what, right? And that leads to a clash, number one. And secondly, when there's something goes wrong, then everybody is also searching for a scapegoat. That's one thing. The other thing is that sometimes I also see that the CEO can play a role, Ajay. For instance,
Yes.
CEOs can also create friction. And I recollect many years ago in one of the organizations that I work for, we always felt that the CEO was in a way conspiring with the head of marketing to set his own agenda, and it was so obvious, and it took forever for us to to sort of get in sync with the marketing folks. That's the second thing. And then I think the other very fundamental thing is that perhaps they do not know what each other is doing. I think that they're sort of working in silos, as you rightly mentioned. And of course, there's very and even when they try to work with each other, there's a poor communication, and that's very surprising and very ironical, because sales and marketing professionals are supposed to have the best communication skills. So yeah, absolutely. So having said that, Ajay, I thought I'll just move on to another very important aspect, because this is really the role of the chief revenue officer, or the CRO, and the role of the chief marketing officer, or the CMO. And in a lot of large companies in the B2B space, there are senior leaders who actually run these roles. And in case the CRO and the CMO are not aligned, imagine the kind of havoc it can really play on their respective teams. And this is really what I would say as one of the pillars of sales and marketing alignment, which is leadership alignment, really. So Ajay, what role do you think the CRO and the CMO could play in bridging the great divide?
Okay, I'll certainly address that, but the earlier part of what I said was describing more of the problem, why it exists, but what can solve it. I think a common leadership is definitely a right first step, which is followed by trust building, sharing of goals, that marketing shares sales goals, sales shares marketing goals, and that kind of alignment can happen. And there has to be a deliberate and thoughtful cross-pollination of talent. Salespeople moving into marketing function, marketing moving into sales. Over a period of time, that kind of dialogue and understanding will happen. And of course, transparency, that sharing of collective and personal successes should be advertised jointly, and not, okay, sales did such a great job, or marketing did. So I think having a common leadership is definitely a good first step to bridge the divide. But coming to your subsequent question, CRO and CMO, how do they play with each other? I think firstly, they need to be friends.
Yeah.
Okay. They should not treat each other as adversaries. And this is a very important piece, that if these very critical positions in the organization are filled with either disruptive individuals or political individuals, or people who have different value systems, they cannot sort of work together. So hiring of these positions, placing particular emphasis on how to make them friends. They don't have to have beer with each other every day, but professionally, how can they be friends? And they share a certain value system. The second is, I think the goal setting KPIs should be shared. And I touched on this earlier as well, that if 40% of the assessment of the chief marketing officer was dependent on the sales results, and vice versa, that 40% of the success of CRO was dependent on how they delivered on the marketing campaigns, or everything that marketing does, then it leads to a great sort of alignment in terms of their activities, their goals, and dialogue. And thirdly, I feel that they have to have a voice in each other's functions. By that I mean, marketing is typically have a marketing council. They will have a marketing planning and budgeting committee or a process. Likewise, sales would have a regional sales meetings. They would have national sales meetings, and they would have sales reviews. These meetings should mandatorily have, you know, anywhere between 15 to 20% membership from the other function,
Right.
so that their voice is heard in a systematic way.
Correct. Correct.
These are really, how I feel, CRO and CMO can help with bridging the divide.
No, I think these are great points, Ajay. In fact, I was listening to a podcast the other day, which had a couple of CROs of some very large SaaS companies like SalesLoft and G2 and so on. And one of the interesting things that they mentioned was how they have now started co-presenting at board meetings with the CMO, right? And
Yeah.
then so that really helps, present, like a common goal, a common objective, common understanding of the challenges, and so on and so forth. And that's really one aspect. And the other thing is, I think, intrinsically, through the various things that you mentioned, the marketing council, the sales, advisory team, and so on and so forth, how they can actually come together to have a shared, deep, and common understanding of their customer. Because very often the gap comes because the understanding of the nuances and the persona of the customer also tends to vary. And so this is, links back to some large organizations who also have, things like a customer advisory board. And sometimes if these customer advisory board are active and they are effective, then they can also bridge gap between sales, marketing, and, even the product team, because what they bring to play is a common understanding of, market trends and, the value prop, positioning, and so on and so forth. So I think, yeah, there's a lot of work, and I think you raised several other points, and we'll go deep into many of them in terms of the shared KPIs and things of that kind in some of our subsequent sections. But before we move on, I just wanted to pose a question to our audience, to our viewers, and it'll be great if they can actually give an answer in the comments or the chat section, which is really, tell us how you were able to improve the alignment between sales and marketing in your organization. So just to repeat the question, tell us how you were able to improve the alignment between sales and marketing in your organizations. We would love to, hear your views and thoughts on that. But moving now forward from a very high level, discussion that we've really had at a strategic, on focusing on some strategic points, let's move into some of the nuts and bolts of sales and marketing alignment, Ajay. And one of the contentious areas, and you did touch upon that, is really the disconnect that lies between, what we call as marketing generated leads, or MQL, and sales generated leads, or SQL. And in some companies, I've seen that they have blindly said SQL will be, let's say, 25% of MQL, or 30%, or something like that. And I would wonder, what a colossal waste of marketing dollars, right? Yeah. Why can't this be closer to 70%, or have a vision of being closer to 100%? So, Ajay, why is there a big disconnect between MQL and SQL on the ground?
Well, it's an excellent question, actually. And one that has to be viewed with a certain deep understanding of the functions and what they are capable of delivering, and also some empathy in terms of what the limitations of each function are.
Right.
So if you look at the sales qualified leads, there will always be a divide between SQL and MQL, because sales is closer to the market.
Right.
They have solid access to word of mouth and referrals from existing customers.
Correct.
And they are always a highly superior lead compared to a marketing generated lead. So clearly the sales qualified leads will be of a much better qualification and much better productivity in terms of conversion rates. And the reason is very simple. Who do your customers refer you to in terms of their like they are people like them, right? So they know that this customer, this prospect also is like me, and he may want your product or service. So sales qualified leads will always be superior. And uh, but to be fair to marketing, can marketing qualified leads uh, be always inferior to sales qualified leads? Not necessarily. Yes, they have a limitation in terms of the level of demographic and psychographic information and segmentation information that they have. And I think we'll touch on this later as well. But to say that MQL cannot be good is wrong. For example, organic leads that may land on your website, or as a result of some of your professional social media platforms like LinkedIn, uh, and centrally driven customer referral, cross sell, and upsell campaigns. The quality of leads that marketing can generate for sales out of all these efforts can be as good as a sales qualified lead. I think they need to understand each other's limitations
Yeah.
and strengths and work towards maximization of the ROI of the marketing dollar and the sales dollar.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think, and one of the big disconnects here, the way I'm also seeing it, is because perhaps there is a lack of common understanding of the persona of the target audience. And,
Correct.
sometimes marketing is driven by quantity, and then they lose sight of that quality. And therefore, the question is that is the marketing team taking adequate inputs from the sales team, in terms of really what is the problem that we're trying to solve? And that in turn could, and if they have a good understanding of that, right? I mean, that could even help them in improving the messaging for the salespeople in their own sales pitches and in their own, in their own sales process. And certainly I feel, and this is a point that you had mentioned earlier, if we are able to perhaps move salespeople into marketing roles which are focused on lead generation,
Correct.
right? I think that we're really looking at how do we bridge the divide, because it's really more on execution, operations, and people alignment. Some of those things are sort of off. But I think there's a lot of work to be done, and it can be done if they're able to align on execution and on people. So this brings me to the next segment, which is really related, which is the all-important topic of market segmentation. And of course, one is segmentation, the other is then defining your target market, and then what's the positioning and messaging, right?
Correct.
So we can have a master class on this subject, actually, Ajay, all by itself. Is a standalone topic. But I think let's try and today prepare a takeaway secret sauce, for our viewers, right?
Sure.
So Ajay, why do organizations struggle with market segmentation, defining the target market, messaging, positioning, and how can the sales and marketing interplay actually play a bigger role to address this?
That's again an excellent question. I think there is a certain transitional element as well that, traditionally the segmentation was really done by marketing and maybe some dialogue from sales. And it was based on often based on certain hypotheses, not always, which was that, okay, this is the demographic of our customer segment. This is where they are in the geography. So that's one of the variables of segmentation. This is the organization size, because we are talking B2B in terms of revenue, etc. This is the head count, and this is their history in terms of their life cycle, and what kind of product needs that kind of a demographic may have. So there is a certain hypothesis-based segmentation, but in the 21st century, it has to be multivariate and it has to be based on analytics. I think that's the first secret sauce, that we need to start using data. We also need to move towards something that I call mass customization, that we break the traditional segments into mass segments and then tailor the communication of a creative channel, mode of interaction with product, and the sales interaction, the product suite, and the pricing and resource allocation according to that market segmentation. So I'll give you an example. I think that might bring this whole complex topic alive. So in our organization, we help students find university places in international study abroad markets like US, UK, Canada, Australia, New Zealand. Now, as a part of our data analytics, because we use a CRM, we found out that our most successful segment in Saudi Arabia was 18 plus students who use Snapchat, want communication only in Arabic, are very phone intensive in terms of their communication. They prefer Saturday as the day of week for their communication, after 5 o'clock or before the evening prayers. And they are looking for a quick solution rather than a big preamble on what you're trying to sell me.
Right.
They are not price conscious because they come from wealthy families, but brevity and action oriented messaging works. Okay. Now, these are segmentation variables which probably we would not have thought of in the 20th century.
Correct.
But in today's world, these segmentation variables are very important, and these need to be tracked through a scientific data-driven system. So we analyzed our CRM system, and this is what we came up with. We said, wow, this is an amazing find. Now we are not going to spray ourselves all over. And this is what I define as mass customization. That we are customizing the message, but massifying it because we know that this is what will going to work with others.
Right. No, I think that's a great point. And coming closer to a classic, B2B kind of a business, I also feel that there could be different phases in segmentation as well, just giving it a little bit of a spin. So, for example, if you're in a startup phase, then perhaps the startup would like to be in a very narrow market segment, because then it's easier for them to understand the motivations, the gaps, and fix those things, and really try to go penetrate deeper and deeper into that segment. And as some of these enterprise class products start to build, as their businesses grow, and they start to get more traction, and then you sort of discover that you're getting traction in some specific segments, more than some other segments. And then it's also about, can you determine the how mature are those segments, what is the growth rate of those segments, our economic conditions. And today, in these days, in these times, economic conditions will make a big difference as far as segments are concerned. And then it also asking the question that, are we really much better prepared than our competitors to actually take the high ground in those particular segments here. So it's also about the salespeople, and I'm talking about aligning the sales and marketing. Salespeople providing some of these critical inputs to marketing, who are often divorced from the field. They really sometimes do not know what's actually happening on the ground. I think that piece, if there can be a mechanism of proactive information flow, I think it can really help a great deal, number one. And second thing I've also realized is that in the B2B space, the concept of a demo script and so on needs to be refined constantly. And it's getting very, very sophisticated, the way you're pitching. And if marketing has these real-time inputs from the field, I mean, they will really be able to provide some fantastic inputs to sales on how to actually customize some of these scripts. So I feel, these are some additional areas of how if sales and marketing align, then they can address areas around segmentation and targets and so on and so forth there. So moving on, So moving on to another very important area, Ajay, and a very practical area where again the sales and marketing interplay is extremely crucial in the B2B space, is actually now managing the pipeline, right?
Yeah.
So marketing focuses on creating the pipeline. They run marketing campaigns and programs, generate leads, and they flood the bottom of the pyramid, right? And then to a large extent, the management of the pipeline, how do we move them forward to an opportunity stage and closure, is left to sales.
Mm-hmm.
And this handover of accountability then sometimes lands between the cracks, and there has to be some alignment around the goals that marketing and sales have, and you did refer to that earlier as well. And because this is really crucial, and this is what will determine if if the revenue will be made or will not be made. So Ajay, in your view, what do you think can be the role that marketing and sales can play together in managing the pipeline?
Okay, so let me start with a kind of a 30,000 feet statement, which is in the 21st century, every marketer is a sales guy and every sales guy is a marketer.
Absolutely.
They have to adopt this mindset. It's very important.
Yeah.
Now, managing the sales pipeline, I think there is a terrific opportunity for organizations to transform this whole piece by using really robust CRM systems. Okay. A system that can track campaigns, inquiries, leads, prospects, hot prospects, sales presentation made stage, conversion and contract stage, and deliver a lot of visibility around data and knowledge that we have gathered out of using a CRM system to its full functionality. So what does a CRM system really do? It automates a number of processes. That's only part of the job. Yes, it'll improve sales and marketing productivity. The second thing it does is it gives visibility enterprise-wide on what's going on. And thirdly, it gives a certain measurements in real time about what is working, what is not working on either campaigns or sales pitches or certain segments that may be performing better than the other. And finally, what it gives the leadership for the first time, a real unbiased database dashboard that even the CEO knows what's going on in sales. He doesn't have to, say that, okay, CRO, please come and make a presentation. Those dashboards pop up on his screen as he logs on in the morning or she logs on in the morning.
Yeah.
So I think adopting a robust CRM system that is actually tuned to what your organizational needs at that point in time are. You don't necessarily have to go for, say, Microsoft Dynamics. You can start small through a web-based system, which may even be free or trial, and then move on as. So there is a way in which you can, upgrade your journey as you go along, and always make sure that the data in terms of your history and performance is carried forward as you do the versioning of the CRM. I would also argue that that earlier the hypothesis-based performance metrics or different conversion stages can be completely eliminated because you can argue with hypothesis, but you can't argue with data.
Right.
And a healthy challenge can also emerge. So I'm not for a moment saying that sales and marketing should be a one happy family. By using data, if sales guys are able to challenge marketing in terms of the quality of the lead generation effort or the campaigns and the marketing effectiveness of the marketing dollar and vice versa, then this kind of a healthy challenge in which is data-based, fact-based, and not political, is very healthy for any organization.
Yeah, no, that's true. I think that's a great point you touched upon. So, I mean, if you really look at the pipeline, I mean, automation is a clear way of managing the pipeline. But there is a role for marketing at every stage of that pipeline, because today, they generate the leads and sales run with the, and then they generate a lot of data, of course. But it's also about what do you do to nurture those prospects, right?
Yes.
Because
Absolutely.
the sales guys typically will make one call and then they will move on to the next one. They will move on. But somebody needs to nurture. So I think this entire, a shared pipeline approach where they're able to nurture those prospects is something that marketing should be even more proactively involved. And therefore, a greater alignment on the entire ownership of the pipeline. Now, having said that, let me just talk a little bit about sales automation as well, because I ran a company called Sage in India when we were a CRM company. We had products like Sales Logics and so on and so forth. And one of the big issues that we saw was really, discipline, with sort of, salespeople. And a salesperson, typically wants to do everything in within his or her own domain, and would not like to share a lot of information upfront, because the fundamental question which they want answered is, what's in it for me, right? I mean, there has to be something in it for them, because a lot of organizations, a lot of salespeople started seeing these tools as tools which were used by leadership and so on to actually police them.
Snoop on
So I
them.
think, yeah, correct, and therefore the salesperson would like to understand, by using a CRM or a sales automation tool, how is my manager adding value to me? So if is my manager, he or she, be able to look at the data and then add value and provide inputs that will help me progress the pipeline? Number one. Number two is marketing adding value by looking at the data. So it's a shared platform, which sales and marketing are, if they're well aligned, and if that starts to happen, then I think adoption will also start to increase. Any other thoughts that you have around adoption of CRM from your side, Ajay?
I think you touched on a very important point, that the CRM has to do something for the sales guys and marketing guys, particularly the sales guys, because marketing guys clearly see the value in terms of the analytics, but sales guys see it as often as disruption of work, which is the other point, that they want to maximize their field time and not filling up reports.
Correct.
So there has to be a certain ease in user adoption, and we have to show them value, that there are these automatic reports that you will get, or certain pointers you will get to your most profitable and convertible lead pipeline that they see actually works as they open their laptop the next morning. So we have to make sure that the user adoption aspects, which are ease of use and building value into what the system delivers, these are two other important points beyond what you said.
Right. Okay, great. So the other, so I just want to move on, Ajay, to another very important area, which is really around certain metrics. And are there any mutual measurable metrics that we can think of which can improve alignment? Because clearly, in my view, and you had also mentioned it, marketing also should run with a revenue budget. I think it's very important, right? Unless everybody is aligned and revenue is the most important thing, nothing's going to happen, right? And all these nice to do activities will just really not add too much value at the end of the day. So any thoughts around this, Ajay?
Yeah, on this, I'll be very brief. I think the organizations work best when there is a clear, measurable, and shared goal, right? And metrics play a huge part. So, for example, the targets for pure marketing campaigns are CPM, CPL, CPC, in terms of impressions, leads, and cost per conversion. And similarly, metrics around sales conversion ratios as you move from inquiry or lead to a hot prospect, to a sales presentation made, to a certain stage which you can internally define what the word is, highly likely to convert. And these kind of metrics, if they are tied back to each other between marketing and sales, that the marketing guy has done a campaign, he's able to see the conversion all the way to the end. Likewise, the sales guy is able to see what was the lead source and what worked for him or her, and that can be passed back to marketing. I think is important, and I think even in the job goal setting or KPI setting, we should not leave it at, okay, the marketing guy's metric is up to CPC, and after that the revenue metric is with sales. No, every effort has to have a measurement all the way up to revenue. And if you are a revenue generating person, then you need to know exactly what has worked for you, and you should be measurable on that.
Yeah, I totally agree. In fact, I'm a firm believer that for every marketing program, the metric should be revenue. I mean, you can have a whole lot of in between metrics, but what's important and that will determine whether you want to run this in the future or just junk it. So if you're even running let's say a program in a certain industry vertical to generate business, then there has to be a revenue outcome. Otherwise, to my mind, it could be a colossal waste. So really,
I think the revenue brings in the strategic alignment.
Yeah.
Operating alignment is brought in by the structure in which sales and marketing are set up.
Yeah.
And then there is a process alignment, which we just spoke about. How do we make sure that every stage is really being tracked and being attributed to the right people?
That's right. And as I mentioned before, for me, the ultimate litmus test is if sales and marketing can have a full funnel approach, and a common shared goal, therefore. Yeah. So this brings us to the final point, really, Ajay, which is around the role of marketing with existing customers. Any quick thoughts on that?
Oh yes, actually, I feel that this is a bit of an underserved area. If you look at, and you touched on it earlier, relationship management. Salespeople have a tendency to move on because once their revenue opportunity is exhausted, they want to maximize the time in the next one. So relationship management. Who are the decision makers? Who are the users? Who are the beneficiaries of the product or a service that has been installed? They could also do qualitative and quantitative surveys, even focus groups, to understand needs, need gaps, and inform product. I would go as far as even having customer advisory boards as really decision-making and feedback loops for the marketing function and the product development function. So relationship management is something that marketing does well, and there is more that they can do. Then there is the question of users and performance analytics and the insights that you may have installed a product or a service in a company, but is it really being used?
Yeah.
And who are the biggest users of different functionalities of your product or service? Are they getting stuck at some points in terms of support? Does that feedback into a product or a service orientation? So these are things that marketing does well. And one very important thing that marketing does extremely well and should do is generate referral programs. That if they are able to cultivate a good relationship with their customers, they can seek referrals and then pass that on to sales, because sales guys may do it on an ad hoc basis, but marketing can do it in a very systematic and scientific way centrally. Then there is the aspect of cross-sell and upsell. Again, yes, sales guys, smart sales guys in particular, would go back to their customers for cross-sell and upsell, but they have a certain paucity and limitation of time because they have to create a new customer pipeline all the time. So there is a certain efficiency role that marketing can play. And I already spoke about input into product service design from existing customers. That's what they can do.
Yeah, great. Yeah, I think I totally agree, Ajay, that marketing dollars into existing customers is perhaps the most underinvested today, right? And people have really not given it the right importance that they should. Because in the B2B space, I think, constant education of customers, and I've seen this many times, customers really don't understand. I mean, they're using some parts of your product, some functionality. They're not using everything. And they don't even know that a lot of that exists. So there has to be constant education to make that happens. Also, the ability for you to be a thought leader with them, because in today's day and age, when all people are moving to the cloud, the cost of, of switch is very low because you don't invest, right? So therefore, how are you also building thought leadership, so that you remain, top of mind?
Yeah, retention is a big issue.
Absolutely.
And which only marketing can.
Correct. Yeah. And one of my favorite areas is how do you make your customers your brand ambassadors? And I think that's something which I think a lot of people struggle with. And I believe that if your customers become your brand ambassadors, then magic starts to happen, right?
Yeah,
absolutely.
I mean, that's why I touched on that idea of customer advisory board.
Yeah, absolutely.
If they feel a part of your to be a part of your success and have a voice in what you're doing, then they will become your promoters.
Absolutely. So thanks so much, Ajay. I think we've had a nice, very interesting discussion around the Great Divide between sales and marketing, and what are some thoughts around really bringing an alignment between them as well. And hopefully for our viewers, we would have unraveled some of the aspects of the sales and marketing conundrum that we set to explore. And here is again, just to repeat a question for our viewers, tell us how you were able to improve the alignment between sales and marketing in your organizations. And thanks so much, friends. And please stay tuned to more interesting discussions on the future of sales in the weeks to come. Until then, please stay tuned to my YouTube channel, Musings with Thomas Abraham, which brings you interesting discussions around sales, SaaS, and HR technology. It's goodbye for now. Stay safe and stay well. And thank you so much, Ajay, for your time.
Thank you. Pleasure was mine.